We don't have the original manuscripts of the New Testament. They all disappeared within a century, I'm pretty convinced, by copying and copying and copying. Frequent handling. The early church was far more concerned to get the gospel out than they were to do exact copying of the New Testament. And that actually is a blessing, because they didn't have those kinds of controls, and consequently you get copies that are not through just one stream, but tons of people all over the place are making these copies. So here's a man who lives in Corinth. He's going to be visiting Rome, and he says, hey, I heard Paul wrote a letter to you guys too. I want to write that out. Do you mind if I copy it when I get there? Sure, that's no problem. This happened, I'm sure, dozens and dozens of times over. And those manuscripts would have lasted as much as 80, 90 years, but would have fallen apart from all these copies being made. So we don't have the originals. They disappeared. And all the copies that we have disagree with each other at some point. Sometimes it's quite a few disagreements, but we have hundreds of thousands of textual variants among our manuscripts. So a question to ask here is, how badly did the scribes corrupt the New Testament? It's absolutely proven that they did. No two manuscripts are alike. So unless one of them is pristine, every single scribe made mistakes. So because the original manuscripts disappeared and because no two copies agree with each other completely, we have to do textual criticism. We can't just rely on one. It's imperfect. So scholars have to reconstruct it on that basis.
Now, the New Testament also states that true Christians can drink poison, Mark chapter 16, and not be harmed. My question is, why don't the vast majority of Christians follow these rules? And if they do, I would like, Mr. Wood, I have a vial of whiteout, liquid paper, highly toxic. I would like Mr. Wood to swig this bottle of whiteout. If he does not do it, then he does not agree that this is the Word of God, because he's a Christian, and Jesus says, according to the Gospel of Mark chapter 16, that he can drink poison and survive. If he does not do it, then he is admitting this is not the Word of God. If he does do it and he survives, I am willing to become a Christian tonight.
Did you say a bottle of whiteout? I might do that for you. As far as the mark, that comes from the end of Mark, which practically every scholar, every Bible scholar in the world says was not authentic, that this was a later addition. And so that's not in the early source material. As far as our earliest records don't have that part about the...
Question: did God write the Bible? Answer: no, definitely not. No. Some of you right now are like, the channel is called the 10-Minute Bible Hour. You seem like such a nice Christian boy, and that's not the Christian answer, but it actually is. And the thing about it is, the Bible itself does not pretend to have been written by God. It is fully transparent about the fact that all of the words on these pages were written by people. A whole bunch of them over a very...
For the errors of the scribes when the New Testament was handed down person to person.
Yeah, excellent question. There are errors that we know about. Why? Because we can compare the documents, we can compare the manuscripts and see where the errors are. In fact, let me see if I can show you a representation of that, because it's better seen than it is described. Here it is. Let's say you have, here's the original, which we don't have. We don't, at least we don't think we have any original documents, okay? So they're all...
Well, this is a field of study that I've been engaged in for 30 years. When I started off in my research, I got interested in the New Testament, and especially how we got the New Testament. The thing that struck me after working on this for about 30 years is that people at large don't know anything about this area, even though it's so important. Many people just assume that we got the Bible by, I don't know, the Bible descended from heaven one day a few weeks after Jesus died. But in fact, it didn't work that way. The Bible was copied over decades and then centuries, and we don't have the originals. We have copies made many centuries later, and there are differences among these copies. And so this is something that scholars work on, trying to figure out what the original said, given the fact we don't have the originals but only mistaken copies. I was raised in an Episcopal church, but when I was in high school, I had a born-again experience and became an evangelical Christian, which is why I went off then to Moody Bible Institute, which is a very conservative, fundamentalist Bible college, which I enjoyed at the time. And this was a place that emphasized that the Bible is the inerrant Word of God. There are no mistakes mistakes in the Bible of any kind. And that's what I accepted then for a number of years. But then as I went on after Moody and went to another college, went to Wheaton College to do my bachelor's degree, I learned Greek. And I started reading the New Testament in the original Greek language. And I started being troubled by the fact that we didn't actually have the original text of the New Testament, because it started making less sense to me to say that the words of the New Testament had been inspired by God if there are places where we don't have the words. Because why would God bother inspiring the words so that we would have them if in fact he hadn't preserved the words that we really would have them? And so this started forcing me to rethink a lot of my evangelical beliefs, and it started leading me away then from fundamentalist Christianity. So when you look at the earliest manuscripts of Christianity, the scriptures of Christianity, and compare them with one another, there are mistakes all over the place. You know there are mistakes because you can compare two manuscripts and they differ from one another. And so you have this problem that people are changing their text, and then the question is, what's the original text? What got changed? And it actually is a big problem with the Hebrew Bible.
My name's Stephen Anderson, pastor of Faithful Word Baptist Church in Tempe, Arizona. Now, I did some research on what the most popular versions are today. This is the most current list. I checked this with a bunch of different sources, and they all came up with the same 5 Bibles. The number 1 Bible today is not the King James Bible. It's the New International Version, the NIV. Number 2 is the King James Bible. Number 3, the New Living Translation. Number 4, the New King James. And number 5, the English Standard Version, or the ESV. It would make a lot more sense to just focus on the 4 corruptions that are the most popular. The NIV is missing 16 entire verses from the New Testament. I mean, just right out of the gate, before we talked about all the thousands of changes, just 16 verses are completely missing.